Everyone, I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center, and I'm so excited that you have found a way to our professional development series. As many of you know, this series meets at noon over Zoom in real time over the course of the entire academic year. We have an amazing slate of fall events. We're scheduling our spring events too. And if you come to enough events, you can get a professional development certificate. My colleague Jeff's going to drop that information for us into the chat. We also have an amazing slate of events. I'll talk about some of those events a little bit later today, but he'll also drop a link in the chat so you can see what we've got coming up this fall. So very excited about everything we've got. We also record our events for asynchronous viewing later. We'll be posted on the TLC webpage later today. So we're very excited about that. So when you have a lot of colleagues say, hey, you missed this amazing event, well, you can point them to it and they can watch it later. Before I go on, we're going to continue with a land acknowledgement.
Can anyone hear the sound? Because I can't.
So I see Jeff working furiously in the background. I apologize that we're not hearing the sound on the land acknowledgement. This has been an issue in other meetings that I've been in this week. I was kind of hoping our pre-testing was going to work for now, so I apologize for that. Land acknowledgement is very important for us to recognize that K-State is on stolen land, and we'll get to see that full land acknowledgement in later professional development events. So I apologize for that for now. Um,
Apologize for that.
it's a first week, let me tell you. All right. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to share my screen. I'm very excited to be today's presenter. Our presenter next week is going to be amazing. We have a presentation next week about what instructional designers can do for you. Jenny Wang is going to be presenting that. Very exciting. But today I'm going to be talking to you about sustainable teaching excellence. And I'm going to share my screen, which is always the hardest part of presenting on Zoom. All right, Jeff, is it seeing what I would like it to show? Jeff says yes. Excellent. And I'm opening up my chat so I can see people's responses in the background as well. So that means that we are ready to go. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is just a slide telling you about our PD series. We're very excited about it, and we're very excited that you're here. So share far and wide so lots of K-Staters can benefit from the program that we have for you this semester. We also this semester are very excited to say that we have a TLC hub. As many of you are aware, K-State today is a little different than it used to be. So what we're trying to do is try to get creative about how we can have information out to people at K-State about lots of different things. Margaret Moore Schroeder has an amazing newsletter that's going to be coming out over your emails. But we also wanted to have something that allowed for a little bit more real-time connection. So we have a Teams channel that we're calling the TLC Hub that if you hit this QR code, we'll get you an invitation to join this, where we can put announcements of our PD events. We can have real-time conversation in the chat about different teaching issues and those sorts of things. So I highly recommend that you engage us in this way as well. And we'll put this up, we'll put a link up to this at the end of today as well. Today, I'm going to be talking about sustainable excellence in teaching. And this is something that I feel very passionate about because I think it's important that we are awesome in the classroom and that we're doing all the things we need to do educationally for our students. But we also want to do it in a way that we can repeat, a way that we can replicate, because sometimes what we do is we take on so much that we can't do that again. And I'm very aware that we all have lots of personal and professional responsibilities and challenges, especially, if you're on the tenure track, you get those research responsibilities out there too, those service responsibilities, administrative responsibilities, mentoring responsibilities. So I want to make sure that we're excellent in ways that we can sustain. So my objectives today, I want to discuss obstacles to sustainable excellence in teaching. And in particular, I want to hear some of your thoughts about what some of those obstacles are. I want to talk about how to achieve excellence in teaching. And I want to talk about how to sustain excellence in teaching. And as I'm kind of sharing with you my confidence today, there's a couple things that I would like us to keep in mind. First of all, I'm going to share my perspectives and experiences. They're the only ones that I have, and it's important that we kind of understand that I'm sharing my perspectives. I've talked to a lot of people, I've done a lot of reading, I've taught for a long time, but these are still my perspectives, and all of the biases and things that I have inside me are going to change the way that I potentially have those experiences. And it's important to recognize that I have a lot of privileges, right? So what you're doing, you're looking and saying, hey, this is a straight white cisgender middle-aged guy. Yes, I am. And that means that those privileges have shaped my experience and those privileges have shaped my perspectives. So please just keep that in mind as we're kind of talking about this and understand that I may have succeeded despite some of the things I do, not because of some of the things that I do. So what I want you to do is I want you to disregard any recommendations that I make that will not work for you. All right. I'm providing information, I'm providing experience, I'm providing my take in the literature and those kinds of things. But if there's something you say, what, that's not going to work for me as a teacher, then don't do it. Your role here is not to become a carbon copy of me or anyone else, is to be the best you that you can be. So I'm going to try to give you some things to think about in becoming your best you. And definitely seek others to complement my talk. I want us to have more conversations and more networking, more collaboration about thinking about teaching. And I hope that our TLC Professional Development Series will give you more than just my perspective. So, what are some of the obstacles to achieving excellence in teaching? And here you can drop into the chat, you can unmute and say it out loud. But what are some of the things that get in the way of us being amazing teachers? And by the way, none of my questions are rhetorical. I'll ask it again and again, but I need some answers. So what are the things? All right, so we got personal stress. Thank you, Melissa. We got time. Thank you, Bree. So many students, so little time. Natalie put in there. Oh, and Melissa also put AI. Yeah, AI is definitely an obstacle we didn't maybe have just a little bit ago. Overload of courses. Thank you, Suzanne. All right, so we got lots of things that are kind of getting in the way of teaching or teaching well because they're taking up our time, they're taking up our cognitive energy, they're taking up our emotional energy. What are some of the obstacles to sustaining it? So maybe we get there. Maybe we have a class beautifully designed. It's amazing, it's accessible, it's interesting, it's fascinating, it's engaging. How do we keep it there? What are some of the things that get in the way there too? Oh, and Jennifer also said desire to bring the latest research to the classroom. That's going to be a problem with sustaining, is we want to stay current, we want to stay up to date. The up to date changes, and semester to semester, new research comes out, new findings come out. What are some things that make it hard for us to do it? Bree just nailed the one I was thinking, and that's burnout, right? We have so many things going on. Melissa says everyone, teachers and students get tired as the semester progresses. I don't know about you, I'm tired now, right? The beginning of the semester has made me tired. So fatigue, exhaustion, stress, all this is getting in the way. Lots more responses coming in. See, some people have more responsibilities, especially being at K-State. I was telling my students this morning, academia is a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie. So what happens is as you get good at things, as you achieve, as you excel, they invite you to do more things. And sometimes what that does is it gets in the way of some of the other things that you were doing really well before. Stress is getting in the way, too many responsibilities, getting older. Yes, I definitely understand that one, right? So getting older, our endurance might be a little bit different, and we might grow into some of those responsibilities that we've talked about. So it sounds to me like collectively we agree there might be some barriers to becoming excellent in teaching, and there might be some barriers to sustaining that excellence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you 10 things from my experiences, my reading of the literature, workshops I've been to, conversations I've had, with 10 ways to promote sustainable excellence in your teaching. And the first of these is to develop and refine an excellent teaching philosophy. So we're going to have to start from a good spot because teaching starts with teachers. And by the way, I've had some people resist the term teacher that I use and say teachers are K-12. I'm referring to the behavior of teaching, and I think there is no shame to a university professor being called a teacher. All right, we are teachers, we are teaching. I'm going to use that term, I'm going to use it with pride. So if that bristles every time I say teacher, put instructor or professor or whatever translation you need to do. But I consider myself a teacher and I'm proud to do so. But teaching starts with teachers. Our teaching personas and our teaching philosophies. Our teacher personas are who our students see in class, and our teaching philosophies are how we think teaching and learning happens. These personas and these philosophies are going to provide the foundations for teaching and learning. So, how we conceptualize that whole experience, how we think about it, is going to provide the foundation for teaching and learning, and it's going to dictate our teaching practices. So what we do is we think about it, we say, this is how it's going to work. And then that philosophy actually changes the way that we actually engage in the behavior. Our teaching personas and philosophies are intentional, they're purposeful, and they're dynamic. I think it's a little unfortunate that I have to have no training in pedagogy to be a college professor, but I need to have a license to teach K-12. So what happens is we need to kind of think about how it is that we're going to create ourselves as teachers, because having an advanced degree in our academic disciplines does not really mean that we have the skill set to teach. So I think those are complementary but not overlapping skill sets. So these complementary skill sets are things that we can lean into with purpose and with determination. So I want us to think about, for each of us, what is the single word, just one. And I know academics like to be verbose, but what is the single word that is key to creating teaching and learning in your classes? What does it all come down to? What's the anchor? What's the foundation? Now, I'm going to ask you to put that in the chat, but I'm going to use the waterfall chat. And a couple of you are familiar with this technique. I learned this from Tracy Brimhall in English way back when. And what this means is you're going to type it in the chat, but you don't hit enter till I say go. So what that will mean is when I say go, it's all going to waterfall in. So I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to type your word into the chat. And I'm going to play two. Someone said I told you too late. Well, that's okay. That's all right. I'm going to type mine into the chat as well. And what I'm going to ask right now is 3, 2, 1. Hit enter. All right. And wasn't that amazing and all waterfalled in? I think this is an amazing technique when we're teaching over Zoom. I love this technique. Thank you, Tracy Brimhall, for teaching it to me. And what we have is we have connection, and we have communication, and we have engagement. That was mine. We have planning, we have joy, we have community, we have engaging, we have curiosity, we have authenticity and patience and connection, relationships, listening, engagement, communication again. These are amazing foundations for us to start with teaching excellence, right? No one put PowerPoint slide, right? That's not what any of us put. We put things that actually are related. We got approachable and empathy coming in there too. We put things that are allowing us to have that communication with our students. And these are amazing starting points. If you didn't have a starting point, I was going to give you a way to kind of think of it. And there might be some people out there who didn't chime in, or some people watching today synchronously saying, I have no idea what my teaching philosophy is. I haven't had to think about that yet. Well, I'm going to give you some places to start just in case. First, be the teacher you want to learn with. All of us have had experiences as students. All of us have had some teachers that we really learned well with. All of us have had some teachers maybe it's a little harder for us to learn with. So be the teacher you want to learn with. Now, understand your perspective might not generalize to all of your students, but it's a pretty good starting point. Also, think about that if your teaching philosophy is not set up to promote student learning and success, you might be in the wrong field. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are understanding that teaching must impact learning. Our job is to teach our students so that they can learn successfully. Our job is to put our students in a position where they can successfully demonstrate their learning in our classes. So think about that as a foundation to start with. And understand that our job is to teach people, not just content. I think this is my first time today quoting Greg Eislein. It probably will not be my last. He's one of my teaching heroes again in the Department of English. Department of English got some amazing people over there. Greg Eislein told me a long time ago, good teachers teach content and great teachers teach people. What I want to do is I want all of us to strive to be those great teachers who understand that our students are holistic individuals that should be supported in our classes. So if you don't know where to start, these are really good places to start with your teaching philosophy. So we're going to teach whole people. We're going to teach inclusively. And I do not mean this as a political statement. I mean this as a moral statement about doing the right thing. What I mean is that every student in our class should have a fair opportunity to succeed in our class. That's what I think that is. Every single student should be supported. Every single student should be welcomed. If we're doing that, we're doing right by them. And our practices should be inspired by these goals. So for me to say I'm going to teach inclusively, for me to say I'm going to teach whole people, it means I have to actually then do that in my practices. So for me to say that and not do that, that would be a problem. Now, as a student, because when I mentioned I was not trained to teach, and hopefully many of you were, but a lot of us were not trained to be college professors. We were trained to be experts in our academic disciplines. I had to kind of think about who I wanted to be as a teacher, and I continue to have this thought process with myself. But I thought about my best teachers. And some of these are my best teachers. And these are people from my entire education. Yeah, I got elementary school teachers on here, high school teachers, people from undergrad, people from grad school. These are some of the best teachers I've ever had the opportunity to learn with. And when I was deciding what kind of teacher I wanted to be, I tried to do like a little content analysis about why are these my favorites? And I found they had two things. The first thing is that all of them appeared to love teaching. All of them appeared to come to class and to really want to be there. They love the content, they love sharing it with me. I really appreciated that. The second thing is that all of them at some point told me explicitly that they believed in me. All of them told me at some point, hey, you can do this. So what I did is say, well, the two things that I want to bring as part of my teaching philosophy might be engagement and supportiveness. These might be things that might be a good, vantage point from my own perspective to help my students learn well in my class. Now I asked students, what do you want in your teachers? And this is a word cloud of some of their responses, a few hundred students. And what are some of the things that are popping up big, popping up most frequently on this word cloud about what students want in their teachers? And you can drop it in the chat. You can say it out loud. But again, none of my questions are rhetorical. We see helpful popping up there. Absolutely. I'll take two more.
Understanding.
Seeing understanding on there. We're seeing caring on there from the chat. Excellent. So what we're doing is we're actually seeing some soft skills, right? Now they want us to be knowledgeable. They want us to be prepared. They want us to be an expert in our fields, all of those kind of things. But they also want some soft skills. They want some supportiveness. And I think it's important for us to know that. We ask students to describe their favorite and least favorite college teachers. And what we see over here on the left side, the purple font, these are the favorite college teachers. What are some of the biggest words they use to describe their favorite teachers? And I'll take just two. We'll keep it easy.
Fun.
We got fun, and fun showed up in the chat as well. I'll take one more. Oh, we got organized showing up in there. So they want us to know what we're doing, but they also want to have an engaging experience in there. See interesting showing up, funny. They want us to be intelligent and smart and knowledgeable, but some energy, some kindness, some niceness, all of those are going to be important things too. How about on the right? What do they not want in their college professors?
Rude.
They don't want rude, and they definitely don't want what? They don't want boring, as we put in all caps. Thank you, Bree. So what's happening here is they want to have some pretty good experiences with what they consider people who are in their corner, people who are supporting them. So I have developed for myself a teaching philosophy, and you can use this if you want or come up with your own. But this is, yeah, Melissa said, don't be a jerk, basically. That's exactly what they want. So let's turn it into positive and say, be supportive, not just not be a jerk. My teaching philosophy is what I call trickle-down engagement. I have data on this. I've published on this. This is something my research program kind of examines, and it's something I want us to consider. And Engage the Sage is it's a YouTube channel I have kind of devoted to teaching tips and tricks you can check out, but it's also wordplay on what I think this teaching strategy is. So we're going to engage the sage. We're going to engage the person in front of the class. If we focus on the experience of the person in front of the class, I think it's actually going to be an indirect student focus that is going to be better for the students in the class. And what we have data to support is this very complicated model, I said sarcastically, that teacher engagement leads to student engagement. So if they perceive you to be engaged as the teacher, they're engaged more themselves. And they learn more. And they learn more in a lot of different ways. Now, one of the big things we see is that if a student sees a teacher being engaged, they're more likely to be in class. It's a lot easier to learn the content if you're there. So one of the things that I would like us to kind of think about as one of the foundations for our teaching philosophies is to demonstrate our engagement. Now, not everyone's going to demonstrate it in the same way. I'm actually a very introverted person. but my teaching persona is extroverted because I find that works a little bit better. And then after my class, I go to my office and die. But I give all my energy to my students, and then I go back and I have to recover from that experience. So I try to demonstrate that engagement. But if you don't want to do that, there are other ways you can demonstrate your engagement, such as by telling them, I'm very interested in this. This is very valuable. This study is very creative. I found this reading very interesting and compelling. There are other ways we can do that with verbal cues that our research shows work as well. One of the first things I had to do when I joined the TLC, and a couple of you are veterans, and you know about this perspective. One of the first things that I had to do is come up with ways to teach people what the foundations of excellence in teaching are. And this is a conceptualization that has worked for me. Again, done research on this as well. And I want us all to bring peace to the classroom. And I love the idea of peace. I love the idea of supportiveness and warmth and caring and welcomeness and just a wonderful place, an oasis away from the rest of the world. But it's also an acronym. And I think that these are five of the foundations that we need to think about bringing to our students for excellence in teaching. And the first of these is preparation. Got to know what we're doing. We got to have a plan. We got to know how we're going to use that 50 minutes, that 75 minutes with our students. Second, we got to know our stuff. We got to have some expertise. Now, when I say expertise, it doesn't mean you need to be a world-renowned expert. It means you have to know enough to teach it, and that's not the same thing. So for instance, I teach general psychology, which means I have 15 weeks to cover the entire field of psychology, and I'm really only an expert for about one of those 15 weeks. The other 14 weeks, I know a lot more than my students. So I know enough to teach it. So in support, we understand when I say expertise, I don't want that to be daunting or intimidating, but we do have to put a little work to achieve that. Our research shows that actually our college students think we do a good job here. They report that over 80 or 90% of their college professors demonstrate preparation and expertise. Where we fall a little short, where the ratings are a little more variable, are the rest of piece. The A is authenticity. They want us to be real humans. They don't want to learn from brilliant robots. They want us to be actual human people. And sometimes they think we don't demonstrate our humanity maybe enough in class. They also want us to care. There's three things they want us to care about. They want us to care about our content. They want us to care about them as students, and they want us to care about the process of teaching and learning. We care about those three things and express and demonstrate our care about those three things, we're probably going to do okay. And then engagement. My definition of engagement is doing one and only one thing at a time. So right now I'm engaged, which means I'm only presenting to you, and I love that opportunity. I'm not thinking about all the other things in my professional life. I'm not thinking about the things I got going on at home. I'm thinking about only this. And when we're engaged and we're doing only this, we're going to invite our students to also only do this, and they're going to learn better when they do so. So I'm going to encourage us to use peace as one of the things in our teaching philosophy. Then we're going to use that to dictate our teaching practices. We're going to teach various courses in similar ways. I'm going to recommend, this is that streamlining, that sustainability. When you find something you like, repeat it. Similar structures, similar policies, similar kinds of assessments. I'm not saying teach the same course under 3 different course titles. I'm saying if you like weekly reflections, adapt them from one course to another. I'm saying if you like a certain group project, adapt the content and the scope from one course to another. And what we can do there is we can start to perfect these things that we really like that get to our learning objectives well without having to reinvent the wheel every time. So I'm not talking about inappropriate repetition. I'm not talking about redundant curriculum, but I'm talking about some of those processes and structures and ways of thinking can be applied to more than one class appropriately. So do make those adjustments and those adaptations as needed. Number two, and some of you are looking at the clock saying, oh my goodness, he's only number two. Number one was by far the longest one. So we are now set up. We're going to spend a lot more time on some of these others. And a lot of these are super practical because one of the things that I sometimes find, I sometimes go to a workshop. I sometimes probably been guilty of giving a workshop where when I left, I didn't have a lot of practical takeaways. I didn't have a lot of things I could do tomorrow. I want a lot of things that you can do tomorrow if you would like. So number two is you're going to use your resources. You don't have to do this alone. There's a lot of people on this journey too, trying to do the same thing. We can use each other to help out. Use your mentors and colleagues. I'm one of your colleagues. I love talking about teaching. I will talk all day about teaching. Access me, access other people on campus. One thing I love about K-State K-State, like we teach well and we invest in teaching. There is a real community around teaching excellence here that I haven't experienced at other places that I've been. It's not just lip service. Teaching is not the tax we pay to do our research. It's something we really commit to. So if you want to get better at this, you want to talk to other people about your ideas, you have an audience who is willing to listen. TLC staff is part of that audience. Workshops and professional development events, not only at the TLC, but they're done by K-State First and a lot of other organizations here. Um, Video resources. We've got a lot of video resources available on our TLC web pages. I'll talk a little bit more about that Engage the State YouTube channel a little bit. And in case you're wondering, what are some of those professional development events? This is the first half of the fall semester, as you can see here. And I'm not going to read all these events, but you can see a lot of different things represented. We got directional design and accessibility and AI and positive psych and all of these kind of things. Wonderful people here at K-State who are committed to excellence in teaching, who want to share with us their ideas to make us all better teachers. So this is the first half of the fall semester. This is the second half of this fall semester. And I do want to highlight one event on there. On November 5th, we have a student panel. Tamara Bauer, an amazing professor in leadership studies, actually has some students who are interested in creating the recipe for classroom community. And what they're willing to do is come share with us that recipe. So, I think it's compelling when we as colleagues, kind of talk about it. I think it's even more compelling sometimes when students tell us what they would like and need. So we're going to have that student panel on November 5th, and I hope you can be there for that. We have a lot of events coming up. Um, we have a YouTube channel called Engage the Sage, lots of videos. I won't go over into all of them. I'll give you some of the categories here in just one second. They're usually pretty short. And actually, we just started some YouTube shorts. So we put out a bunch of videos in the last couple of weeks that are less than a minute long to kind of like one little teaching tip, one little teaching idea, and those kind of things. But check those out. It might give you some ideas for helping with your class. These are some of the domains in which we talk about. So demonstrating your teaching excellence. If you're going up for an award, you're going up for tenure or review, you're applying for a job. There are things that you can do with your teaching statement. For instance, we got videos to talk about it. We got videos about the beginning and the end of the semester. We got videos about active learning. We got videos to show your students about how to succeed in college and how to apply to graduate school and how to go on interviews and all those kind of things, and lots of others as you see here. If you access this PowerPoint after, the slides after the last slide that I show you are linked to many of these videos. So we've kind of made them a little bit easier for you to find if you would like to. So definitely use your resources. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to streamline our structure and content. Some of us are doing too much. And what I mean by that is we're overcomplicating education. So what I can think we can do is we can streamline our structure and content. So we're getting our students to their goals. I'm not saying relaxing standards. I'm not saying teaching less. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm talking about doing right by our students in a way that we can manage. So what we can potentially do is have recurring assignments on a regular schedule. Be predictable. If you have weekly assignments or every other week assignments or those kind of things, have that assignment recur. What this is going to do is you're going to be able to use the same rubric again and again for different kinds of content, but your students are going to get good at doing that assignment. They can focus on demonstrating their learning, not figuring out how to do the assignment. And what this will also do is create a rhythm for your course. That rhythm for your course is going to mean your students are going to know when things are due. They're going to get them done. And we're spending less time dealing with student issues for students not knowing when they were supposed to do it or how to do it or where to upload or all of those kind of things because that became predictable. One of the other things that I recommend is 1,000 points. I love having my class be 1,000 points because it's a psychologically satisfying number. And what that means, to get an A, you need 900 of those. I remember as a student sometimes it'd be like 622 points, and I'd have this many points and I have no idea how I'm doing, busting out the calculator, figuring it out. In my classes, it's pretty easy. If you have 850 points, you're not to the A yet. So it's a little bit easier, I find, in my classes to kind of streamline some of those conversations because students know where they are. And I always set my Canvas to show the points, not the percentages. So my students are understanding how they're accumulating toward those grading goals that they might have. When we're deciding what to teach, we cannot teach everything. So these are the two things that I recommend that we do. We recommend teaching what is important and necessary, and recommend what is teaching what is relevant and interesting. Those are the two things. If it's not important and necessary and it's not relevant and interesting, I don't teach it. So what I want to do is make sure that everything in my class fits into one of these two bins So it has explicit value that I can share with my students. In that case, there's no trivia. Everything fits because it's either important or interesting. So someone asked in the comments, do I find that students stop trying once they reach 900? No, because typically my last thing is more than 100 points. So what happens is they have to do the last thing, which is usually the final exam or the final project, which is more than 100 points. So they have to do at least some of it in order to get that. I will say sometimes a student only needs like 30% on a final exam to get the A in the class. Oftentimes that's what they will do. But I haven't found that students are, say, not engaging the last part of the semester as a result. Someone asked, do they ask for extra credit? Of course they do. Yes, my students will ask for extra credit. And actually, one of the Engage the Sage videos talks about my philosophy on extra credit. So check that out. I want our courses to breathe. I want us to be able to teach less better. I think this is important. Teach less better doesn't mean teach worse. It means focus in on the most important, interesting content and do a really good and deep job on that. I think sometimes we're actually hampering ourselves by being too comprehensive in our coverage. It's hard on us, it's hard on our students, rather than boiling it down to the essence of those student learning outcomes, which actually should be dictating what we're teaching in our class. So that's something that I recommend. I'll also put out, if you disagree with anything, don't do it. The fourth thing I recommend to help kind of streamline this experience, make it easy for us, is to focus and spread out your assessments. Assess what you need to assess. Do it directly, do it fairly, and do it succinctly. I use what I call the minimum effective dose of assessment. And I'll say that again. This is the minimum effective dose of assessment. When we're talking about like the minimum effective dose of a drug, it's the least amount of drug you need to do to get the effect. I'm thinking about the same way for assessment. What is the least I need my students to do to evaluate whether or not they've learned? When I do the minimum effective dose of assessment, I'm streamlining how much they have to do. I'm streamlining how much I have to process, but I'm still achieving the goal of assessing their learning. So this is something that I highly recommend is figure out, can they do this in one page? Do they really need 10? Because sometimes what happens is we kind of experience the end of the semester saying, oh my goodness, I could have had them present or do an oral presentation that was 2 minutes long, have figured out the same thing. Instead, I had to watch 15 minutes and I had to devote this many class periods to do it and all of that. Minimum effective dose can often get us there better. Make the assessments valuable. Make it very closely tied to the learning assessments. I was in a workshop the other day. I got on a soapbox, kind of talk about assessment a little bit. I think one of the issues we sometimes have with students not buying into assessment or students using AI in assessment and things like that is they don't see their inherent worth. I think if we give meaningful assessments that map clearly on what they want to learn and what they want to achieve in our class, I think we'll reduce, not eliminate, but we'll reduce some of that less buy into the assessments and maybe some of that AI use on those assessments. And make them exciting for you. I know that I've done this well when I'm looking forward to a deadline. When I'm saying, I can't wait to see what my students are going to do in this assignment coming up. When you've done that, you've probably achieved it. Because I know a lot of colleagues and I myself have been guilty of, oh my goodness, that paper's due tonight. I don't want to get those papers. What I've done now, I think in every class without exception, I want to see what they are going to be sharing with me. So think about this from your angle too, because everything you assign is going to come back. Spread out your assessments. If you have everything coming in at the same time and they're all big, it's going to wear you down. I recommend more frequent, lower stakes assignments. So I prefer weekly reflections than big term papers. I prefer 2-minute reports rather than 20-page term papers. I'm going to try to keep it as short and manageable as I can, but I'm going to do it frequently so I can keep track of their learning. If I do it frequently, I can get more ahead of any confusion they have, any gaps they have, any issues they have, so I can teach them better. And you can have these scaffold. So you can have the smaller assignments scaffold, increasing complexity, and build toward a bigger thing. For instance, if you want to have a big research paper at the end of the semester, maybe your first part is research question, your second part is hypothesis, your third part is method, your fourth part is intro, or whatever. And it can scaffold into the larger paper at the end. And then the large paper at the end is a capstone. It's really an achievement in your class that they've gotten feedback all along the way and they've done better. Another trick you can do is use student choice or maybe even assign them to batches. I mentioned earlier, I have 200 students in my Gen Psych class. Sometimes what will happen, they'll say, all right, for this deadline, if you have a last name that starts from A to L, this is your deadline. The second deadline is for everyone else in the alphabet. And what that does is it means that half of my students are doing it in each bin. It's less for me to process. Understand everything you'll assign will come back, and do not overwhelm the end of the semester. I know that at one point I was guilty of 55% of the points in one of my classes being due in the last 10 days of the semester. That was horrifying for my students. It was horrifying for me. Thank goodness I no longer do that. But kind of think about, you're overwhelming them. That's not fair to them, but it's all going to come back on you in a very, very constrained grading period. Don't do that to yourself. Number 5, love this one. Get the maximum for your students. This fits in with my minimum effective dose of assessment. Shorten your assessments. Almost everything that you can do can be shorter. So if you have given them 2 pages, you could probably get by with 1. If you give them 100 words, you could probably get by with 75. You give them 15 minutes, you could probably get by with 10 or 8. What this is going to do is going to be win-win. It's going to be less for you to process, right? So right away, there's a time saving issue there. But number 2, and this is where the whirlwind comes in, if you think they probably need 2 pages, but you only give them 1, you're going to process their second, third, or fourth draft, not the rough draft, because their rough draft is going to be too long and they're going to have to revise it. Revised work is better work. This is one of the best hacks that I've kind of developed my entire teaching career, is if you set a maximum, never a minimum, never say at least 5 pages, say no more than 3, right? If you set that maximum and they have to revise to get down to that, and they ever tell you, I wish I had more words, I wish I had more pages, you're probably going to get pretty good work from your students. Easier for you to grade, less time for you to grade, and they do better. This is all the win. Personalized assessments. Let them do something that is relevant for them. This can be more interesting for you. If it's personalized, you're not reading the same paper 30 times. You're reading different experiences, different perspectives, different topics. Harder for them to cheat, right? So they can't bring it from each other as well. ChatGPT doesn't maybe know their life as well, although I realize those prompts are getting real hard to work around. But this is going to be a really cool for them to show the application of that. And you can crowdsource examples for your class. So you can start to find out all the different ways that that phenomenon manifests. And then in your next semester, you have more stories to tell. One student took this tactic. One student had this experience. Those are really cool ways to kind of deepen the learning for your students by having them personalize and actually apply that information. For my colleagues out there who are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, that application, that is a higher level of Bloom's taxonomy than that regurgitation and identification at those lower levels. 7, we're going to infuse empathy into our courses. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I talked about caring and stuff a little bit earlier, but we can infuse empathy everywhere. Empathy is kind of taking on that cognitive and emotional perspective of our students, thinking about what are they going through and trying to make our class meaningful and successful for them. We can infuse this in our syllabus. I have a syllabus statement that basically says empathy is part of this course. I'm here for you. I understand it's not the only thing in your life. If you need help, reach out and I will help you. Let them know that. You can put empathy in your Zoom approach, your course structures, your late policies, your attendance policies, all of those kinds of things. And the last kind of video link you see here is the problem with academic rigor. I want us to move away from an understanding of academic rigor as something like arbitrary difficulty, which is I think what a lot of us think rigor is just arbitrary, just make it harder for harder's sake. Academic rigor is challenge with support. I'm not saying we relax challenge. I'm saying we make the challenge appropriate and we be supportive through challenge. So don't make it easy, but make it something that is going to be reasonable and appropriate for your class. And at the end of our semester, and I'll talk more about TVALs in a talk later this semester, we're going to get some feedback. And when we get that feedback, well, I'll say this. What's the emotion that we most often feel when we're about to look at our TVALs? And I'll take a couple answers in the chat or out loud. What's the emotion that we're about when we're about to click open that TVAL report? Stress, dread,
Anxiety. Yeah.
anxiety, nervousness. Yes. None of us are like, yay, can't wait to read the TVALs. No matter how well you did that semester, there's always that stress, that anxiety, that nervousness. Like, oh my God, did this course land? Right? you're going to get feedback. And there are ways, and I'll talk about them later this semester, how to get more productive feedback. I can't tell you how to get positive T-vals, but I can help you get better data in your T-vals. And we'll talk about that later this semester because I want to get data I can use. I don't want them to tell me I hated Don. I want to say I hated Don because. I want to know like what was the issue, what was the reason, so that I can help fix that next time. So we're going to use this feedback as information. We're not going to overreact. All right. I think it's good we get it a couple days after the semester for lots of reasons, not least of which I can do it at home in a safe place and not walk into a meeting with a colleague immediately after because I don't know what I'm about to read. Right. So what happens is I'm not going to overreact to the student feedback, and you shouldn't either, because we're going to use it as data. It's amazing to me how many of us are data scientists, but we treat teaching as something different, right? T-vals produce data. And what we have to do is we have to kind of think about what does that data allow me to conclude? So to let that feedback inform my course decisions. One of the feedback I had a long time ago, and I'll probably repeat this story with T-vals later, is I had 100-point classes for a really long time. I was like, that's a super satisfying, simple number. My classes add up to 100 points. And what happened is my exams might be worth 15 points. And my students told me they couldn't study for a 15-point exam. It just wasn't heavy enough for them to actually study for. I was like, it's 15% of your grade. And they said, well, if you made the class out of 1,000 points and the exam was worth 150, I'd study more. And I was like, that is ridiculous. It's the exact same weight. And after years of this feedback, I did what they asked. I just made it 1,000 points. The exam was 150 points, and the complaint went away. It went away completely forever. And what happened is I was like, you know what? This lack of ability to kind of deal with percentages, this kind of math phobia is a real thing for some of my students. The absolute number of points, regardless of the relative number of points, was important to them. I changed it and it took away that issue. So let the feedback inform your course decisions, but understand it is your decision. You are not obligated to make every suggested change. And one of the things that sometimes people do is they throw out the good in their class, making the change that one student suggested. So use it as information. Think about whether it's going to fit. Think about if it's going to work. But you are not obligated to completely overhaul your course from semester to semester. And in fact, I recommend that you don't. I recommend you tweak. When we tweak, we're making small, subtle adjustments based on our experiences, based on the students' feedback, based on the students' performances to help our classes get better. Do not start from scratch. I can't even think of a situation where I would want to do that, right? But if you want to sustain teaching excellence, I would much rather you see make these small adjustments and see how they go. Because in programmatic research, we don't change all the variables at once. And then, because we then can't figure out what is going on. You can't change all the variables and then know what did and did not work. So if people are having issues with the assignment and the point structure and the lecture strategies and all that, if you teach a completely new class and it goes poorly, you don't know why it went poorly and you don't know why it went well because every variable has changed. So if you think, I'm going to change my point structure, then change the point structure. If you're going to change some of the topics, change some of the topics, but don't change everything at once. It's going to be really, really hard for you to understand how that course progressed. And then number 10, and I wanted this to be the 10th one. I want you to focus on maximizing your experience as the teacher. The key, in my opinion, to achieving and sustaining teaching excellence is making the experience positive and fulfilling for you. When you experience this, when you experience validation and fulfillment and just professional joy from teaching and learning, you're going to do it better. If you're thinking I'm only doing this for students, or I'm only doing it because K-State told me to, I'm only making the accessibility changes because of federal law, and not thinking I'm investing in this to help my students learn, which is important to me, when you don't take that intrinsic motivation, this is going to be super hard for us to be able to do. So I'll invite all of you to think about how you can make this experience more about you and your professional achievement and your professional fulfillment, because that is actually going to help your students learn. So in conclusion, I'm open up for questions and conversations here in a second. To achieve and sustain excellence in teaching, I want you to create an excellent teaching philosophy. I want you to use it to inspire your practices. You can't say you're about engagement and then not do engagement things, right? You have to have it actually be part of your practice. It has to manifest and operationalize in your courses. Use your resource in a lot of these operational suggestions. and then enjoy the process because this is hard. Teaching excellently is hard. It's one of those horizontal goals where you're not really an excellent teacher categorically. You're only as good as your last teaching performance, right? It's hard to kind of do that, but you got this. And what I want to know, this is your exit ticket before we get to open conversation, because I think exit tickets are important in my teaching. I want to know what is one concrete takeaway from our conversation today that you're going to use to either achieve excellence or sustain excellence. And I want you to drop that into the chat. And we'll kind of see those as they come up. While you're doing that, I want to thank you for your attention today. I want to thank you for your contributions. I'm going to open this up for questions here in just 1 second. I'll remind you that we're going to share these slides with you if you would like. We'll put them up on our website, or you can contact me directly. And there's lots of links to lots of videos in this. But I want to know what your takeaway is. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we got a little bit more of a conversation about it, but drop that takeaway into the chat. All right, we got succinct assessments, reminder that T-vals are data. Don't overreact to the T-vals. A few new activities. That sounds fun. Student-centered teaching is great and important that teaching is also positive for the instructor. The two things that teachers shape, the thing that they love teaching and they believed in me, my best teachers, minimum effective dose, short assessments, and you have to enjoy teaching for your students and to enjoy your teaching. I love that. I'm really glad that you took those away. PEACE acronym is healthy. I love that PEACE acronym. Simple and streamlined is not only okay, but probably even better. And to use resources like mentors and colleagues. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And what I want to do now is I want to open either for questions that you might have, but also for any other things that you would contribute, because I want to learn from you too, about how to teach excellently and how to sustain that excellence. And you can drop in the chat and I'll read it out to the group. Or you can just unmute and say it out loud. And by the way, part of the reason I'm reading the chat is for asynchronous viewers who might not see the chat. I want them to also benefit from your responses. LB said that my presentation demonstrated a great example of how to teach. Thank you, LB. I appreciate that. That makes me feel good. Melissa has a question for everyone. What is your top tip for sustainable excellence in teaching? I'm very curious about that too. So what are people's top tip? Again, you can drop them in the chat or you can say them out loud.
I found that weekly quizzes are way better than large exams in my courses because it keeps everyone very engaged, very on top of what we're learning. But it also, I also have Canvas grade them. I don't know. It's worked out so well for me. I also do it at the very beginning of class so that everyone's on time. And I love it.
I love that.
And it
That is
works well.
fantastic. Very nice. Natalie says supportive colleagues. That's a really important thing to help us sustain our teaching. And by the way, you all need to have that colleague that you can say, "Can I close the door for a second because something just happened and I need to get it out there." Vent to that colleague. That colleague will trust that, your moment is not all of your moments. Don't vent on social media. I've seen too many of my colleagues kind of talk smack about their students on social media. Don't be that person. Backward planning. I love that. Backward planning, I don't know if Suzanne's able to discuss this, but backward planning is something our instructional design team probably spend a lot of time talking about next week. Is basically thinking about where do I want my students to get and then planning the entire semester to get them there. So kind of think about the end goal right at the beginning and then backward engineering all the way there. Super, super important. And I imagine our instructional design team is going to talk about that next week. Let's see.
I think it's related to what you said about not making too many changes, but I think also in the day-to-day of teaching to, use the phrase be the goldfish, right? To forget about it. Because sometimes there's going to be a day where maybe the engagement just doesn't feel like it went well that day. And to understand that happens to us all, but then kind of pivot and try to bring that energy back to the next class.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. We all have bad days in the classroom. And I had a colleague once tell me their favorite thing about teaching is all the do-overs, right? So doesn't go well on Tuesday, you got Thursday. Doesn't go well on Thursday, you got the next Tuesday. We got a lot of do-overs. And I'd actually, in one of our studies, we had tracked the daily engagement of one of the professors. One of my former colleagues, Clive Fulligar, is now retired, very bravely let me assess his students every day in his class about how he was doing. And we assessed his engagement from their perspective as well as their engagement. And he had a bad day. There was one day just you saw like this level, and then bam, his engagement was way down here in one day. And the coolest thing happened, the students' engagement was higher that day. And we were kind of interested in this. And what we think happened is because he was always there for them and he had this one bad day, they were there for him on his bad day. They kind of took on some of that engagement for the class. And I thought it was a really cool finding that we had in that project, that if you're bringing it all the time and you have a bad day, students are going to be with you. Now, if every day is a bad day, that might be different. But if you're having mostly good days, your students might give you the benefit of the doubt on those days when you need it. So let's see, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. There's amazing things going on here. Greg's talking about you always got to come back to that teaching philosophy. So when you're thinking about what am I all about, and mine might be engagement. When I'm thinking about what do I do today, I'm going to engage. That's what I do. And having that as kind of that overarching principle. Carrie said finding one thing in every class that she's excited to share or do with my students can be very small. This is awesome. Any other things or any other questions that people might have before we conclude? I actually want to keep this to about a 50-minute session every week because I know people might have 1 o'clocks. We are going to drop the post-event survey into the chat so you can kind of complete that. We'll also drop in the link to join that TLC Hub. That TLC Hub is something where, again, we're having that potential for real-time conversation over Microsoft Teams that you can kind of engage in, but definitely engage in those two things. But any additional questions that people have?
I'm going to ask this one because I was going to bring it up anyway.
Yeah.
Don, what do you do when a student has a bad day?
I ask them if they're okay, and I ask, what can I do? And sometimes, the student often say, I had a bad day, but I came here thinking, this is what I needed to do. It's on my schedule. I thought maybe this class would brighten it up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I also let that student know that I'm a resource for them in a lot of different ways. And I know a lot of people on campus who can help. In a few weeks, we'll have Andy Thompson here. We'll have Camilla Roberts here. We'll have Jason Maysberg Tomlinson here. Some of my colleagues on campus who are excellent at helping. We'll have some student well-being people later this semester as well. So I'll just say, is there anything I can do? Is there anything to help? I know a lot of people, you don't have to suffer in silence. That's what I try to do. I will say I have a class of 200 people. Sometimes I'm not going to notice, right? But the ones in the front, I'm going to be able to notice and engage with those. So I do recognize that this is kind of be limited in the logistics of the class we have. And Cheryl says, give them peace and grace. I think it's important. I think sometimes, I'm a social psychologist, we jump to attributions too quickly. So we think that, the student is having an off day because they're lazy, because they're disengaged. Student might be having an off day due to something that they are trying really heavy to carry, and it was all they could do to come to your class that day. So I think kind of not jumping to attributions and asking if they're okay and asking what you can do is a little bit better to them to give you some context. And if they just said, hey, I'm just off today, we'll say, hey, I'm glad you came. Let me know if I can do anything. Melissa said, using the phrase, I noticed that. Those I statements are really important. I think sometimes I don't use them as much as I should, so I appreciate Melissa with that reminder. But those I statements like, I noticed that, and then saying something about, I noticed that you weren't as attentive today. Is everything okay? That might be good to know. It's also good to know because it's showing your students, as Melissa indicates, that they're not invisible, right? You see them. And I have more students in my class than some students had in their high school. So sometimes they expect at K-State that we're not seeing them. So just noticing them and even just saying, hey, glad you made it today. Even if they look fine, right? Hey, I'm glad you made it today. I really enjoyed learning with you. Something like that could really help out. Someone asked, what advice do you have for students that don't seem super excited to be in your class and are therefore not super engaged? I teach a class that's a general ed class. Someone said, I'm here because the K-Board said I had to be here. I was one of the students yesterday. I'm assuming that was an upper class student and not a first year student. They said, I'm here because K-Board needed me to be here. And I said, okay, that's great. But I want you to come back on Thursday because I'm going to make this your favorite class. And what I did is I spent yesterday talking about the value of my class, the interest of my class, and all those kind of things. And I said, you may come here for extrinsic reasons, but I want you to come back for intrinsic ones. And this is a conversation that I have on the first day of my class. Well, we are about out of time. I'll stick around for a couple seconds if people have any more, but I want to thank you so much for your attention, your participation today. I really appreciated all the comments, all the contributions, and I love spending time with excellent teachers. So thank you for being here. Next week, our instructional design team will talk about what instructional designers can do for you. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.